The self-imposed deadline nears for the regulation of legal marijuana here in New York State. We'll hear from the Cannabis Control Board on if the state will see legal adult use sales before the end of the year. Hi everybody and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm Ryan Peterson here in Albany. The legal adult use cannabis industry continues to make gradual progress here as the self-imposed deadline of retail sales happening by the end of the year gets a lot closer here. Cannabis Control Board providing a very limited update this past week at a recent meeting, mostly covering the control board procedure for future meetings. This follows board approving the first retail dispensary licenses in state history, 36 of them issued late last month out of more than 900 applications. No word yet on additional license approvals or that ongoing lawsuit challenging the application process that is currently prohibiting the licenses being granted in 5 regions across the state. We're joined by Damian Fagan, the Chief Equity Officer with the Office of Cannabis Management. Damian, thanks so much for giving us some time.
Thank you for having me.
So let's talk about this here. I know everybody's anxious as to when these sales are going to start. Everybody's been waiting. The goal, of course, has been the end of this year. And recently, those first licenses were issued, 36 in total, 28 to entrepreneurs, 8 to nonprofits. And I want to talk about that first because New York State is really the first to prioritize nonprofits here. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. First time to ever license nonprofits.
And what is the reasoning behind that? Talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's a very innovative approach to launching a legal cannabis market. But we have had such a complicated history with this plant. It touched so many lives in so many different ways. It had everything to do with recidivism, criminal justice reform, workforce development, access to jobs, housing. And there were a lot of nonprofits around the state that were helping people who were incarcerated re-enter society. There's an ecosystem of support and advocacy that led us to where we are today, that led us to legal cannabis. And we saw, a perfect match with the nonprofit space in providing them some sort of access to some of the revenue and profits that are going to be generated in this industry to keep pushing out those programs, to keep providing those services. We want to strengthen our nonprofit space and their ability to serve this population, and how better to do that than, you can also support their work by buying cannabis at their shops.
And of course, those who were negatively impacted by the long war on drugs, getting them the first shot at these licenses too. And a majority of them went out to New York City and Long Island, but we're not done just yet. They've got a couple more steps to take before they can actually begin these sales. And what is that process for them right now?
Yeah, I think, the most important part of that process is really getting them to understand true parties of interest. They are going to be entering a 2-tier market. And a 2-tier market, much like we have with alcohol that separates the suppliers from the retailers, doesn't exist in other cannabis industries. The only other cannabis industry that has a 2-tier market is Washington State, which has the most stable cannabis market in the country. And so, there are very specific regulations around who they can take money from and what that money can do in terms of controlling or pushing the management decisions of the company. We really want them to understand that before they start taking on investment and bringing on partners.
One of the shifts that was announced here, from what I understand it too, is they're going to be allowed to begin deliveries right away, which wasn't only the case. And is that because sometimes there have been some concerns about storefronts and loans becoming available as soon as the commission would have liked?
Yeah, I mean, we all hoped that, we'd have more storefronts leased and ready with our partner agency, Dasney, on this by the end of the year. But it's taken a little bit longer than we thought. And so, we came up with this really innovative solution, to provide this, temporary way for them to start generating revenue, getting their brand developed, getting their website up and running, finding their customers. And it also a pipeline for us to start moving some of the product that our conditional farmers and processors have been growing over the last 9 months and processing into final products. And so it actually is an incredible way to start your business because you don't have the high overhead costs of a lease, and you can start generating that revenue that's going to help you establish your business when you are in that brick and mortar space.
Now, for those that have already been in the long-established medical cannabis industry, What are the steps for them, and how are they going to be able to eventually break into this retail market here for adult recreational use?
Yeah, and I want to stress this to all of our medical patients across the state. The medical cannabis program, needs to be improved. It needs to grow. We want it to be here and exist sustainably alongside our recreational market. And so, in the regulations, the proposed regulations that we released about a week ago, there's language there about what those companies will have to do, the steps they'll need to take to transition into the adult use market. That transition, in the proposed regulations, and we still have to go through public comment period, sees them transitioning first on the supply side of the market. As wholesalers, as processors, distributors, they would immediately be in the adult use market as the largest, producers, legal producers in the market. But they would not have their retail locations set up for 3 years. So they would mostly be selling their products to our social equity dispensary owners, to our card recipients. And they would be existing in our supply chain with our farmers and with our retailers in this kind of healthy, dynamic, competitive ecosystem.
Now, as much as you can comment on it, I'm talking about the lawsuit that's currently playing out, preventing the state from issuing 63 licenses across 5 different regions here. We're talking about a company that's based out of Michigan, as I understand it, and they're upset over how the application process went for out-of-state companies. Clearly, this isn't really slowing things down for you guys. I mean, you were able to get these first 36 out there regardless.
Yeah, and I can't comment on pending litigation that's currently being litigated in court right now, and I hope that is resolved eventually for those 5 regions. But this is not uncommon. I would encourage people to look at what happens in every equity program that's rolled out in every other state across the country. This is something that is becoming more common as well. But we do hope to have clarity on the future of card licensees in those regions next year. And until then, we will proceed with the remaining regions. And at our next board meeting, we'll be rolling out our next round of card licensees.
Right, and that's happening on a rolling basis, and there were initially 903 applications, but for anybody out there that may still be interested in pursuing this, is that's still something they can get their ducks in a row and get started here, yeah?
Yeah, listen, how many liquor stores does New York State have? Right. Almost 3,000. We're starting our market with equity with those most harmed by cannabis prohibition. For very clear and ethical reasons, as well as the legal mandate outlined in the MRTA. But we still need a lot more retail. And the regulatory package we released last week outlines all those dispensary licenses, the requirements for them, from municipal rules to operating requirements. And so we plan to license thousands of retail locations over the next 3 to 5 years. The state clearly has demonstrated they have a high demand for cannabis. We want to meet that demand with legal product that's grown right here in the state of New York by our farmers and made by our processors, and including a lot of equity participants in the supply side as well. We really want to see a dynamic, thriving industry here that looks like the state and that represents our values and incorporates those most harmed. And so we fully intend to do that with a lot more licenses over the next few years.
Okay, as we wrap up, here's where I put you on the spot. Are we going to see the sales happen by December 31st?
Yes.
There it is.
I'm very hopeful. I'm 75% sure.
All right.
That has been our North Star all year. It has been a motivating force, I think, for a lot of people to understand, government can move kind of slowly. And when you do have that goal of meeting something by the end of the year that, our executive director outlined throughout the year, and the governor also indicated, it can really be a motivating force for staff and all the stakeholders to really make it happen. And we are hopeful that we will have the first legal sale by the end of the year.
Damian Fagan, Chief Equity Officer with the Office of Cannabis Management. Damian, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Angry concert goers could lead to some new state legislation. When we return, we speak with a legal expert on how a debacle with Ticketmaster and Taylor Swift could it bring some legal action. Remember, if you've got a comment, story idea, we'd love to hear from you. Email EmpireStateWeekly@gmail.com or find us on Twitter. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm Ryan Peterson here in Albany. After demand for those Taylor Swift tickets caused the entire Ticketmaster website to crash, some state leaders are calling for change now. The high demand caused insufficient ticket inventory, even canceled outright the general public ticket sales. Ticketmaster has apologized to Swift and her fans, explaining that her new tour broke records. Company also saying online bots, as they're called, contributed to the chaos. While part of the legislation signed by Governor Hochul back in June would crack down on those bots trying to snatch up those bulk tickets. Some say more needs to be done.
Even if Ticketmaster was a decent company, and they're not a decent company, there still would have been upset fans because there just aren't enough tickets. But Ticketmaster's practices, and by virtue of them being a monopoly, they compounded this problem exponentially. When you've got the average Taylor Swift fan, the average Swiftie trying to get a ticket on Ticketmaster for a concert in their state, in their neighborhood, they think, oh yeah, there are 40,000 seats in this arena that I've got a chance to get a ticket for, when in reality, there are maybe 20,000 tickets made available for sale. And for most of those fans, they never stood a chance.
When he returns to Albany, he plans to reintroduce.
We're pleased to be joined now in studio by Ryan McCall, partner with Tully Rinke Law Firm. Ryan, thanks so much for coming in and giving us some time. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So let's talk about this at the state level first. We've seen a lot of state lawmakers come forward now saying something needs to be done. We need to look into this. As we know, Live Nation bought up Ticketmaster a few years ago. People were worried about it becoming a monopoly. If there are any moves the state can make, what are they?
So I think at this juncture, what's really going to happen next is the state's going to begin looking into how can we begin to protect our consumers, meaning that how can we protect our consumers from retailers such as when the bots are buying up all of the tickets, selling them at a substantially higher price, not allowing state consumers to be able to enjoy venues at a reasonable price. I think really what you're going to begin to see is the state lawmakers diving into Ticketmaster and other retailers saying, how can we ensure that this isn't going to happen? And I think you're going to begin to see more legislation being put forth by both the Attorney General in both the State Assembly and Senate.
Right, and I know I've read elsewhere some other states, some Attorney General's offices already saying they're going to launch their own investigations into this. And for those that don't know, bots are essentially a computer program that are run by people, that the software enables them to go up and scoop up these mass amount of tickets at once. And then they turn around and they sell them on a third-party site for way more than they were going for it at face value.
Yeah, and this is something that isn't necessarily new. This is present in other areas such as retailing for sneakers, among other types of issues. I think really now what you're beginning to see with this most recent fiasco is it affected a lot of people. There were tons of people who wanted to get Taylor Swift tickets who weren't able to get them, or when they went to go buy them, they're looking, hey, these are retailing for $150. Why do I have to pay $3,000?
Right. And at the federal level, the BOTS Act, which was signed into law in 2016, giving the federal government the authority to crack down on these people that would use this software for it. And this is something they've been looking at for years. And again, we talk about the monopoly factor here and the fact that Ticketmaster now seems to have this stranglehold on the ticket selling market. So the federal government seems to have a little bit stronger action here than at the state level, yes? And what they're able to do?
I would agree. And I think the reason for that is the Federal Trade Commission is now beginning to look into Live Nation as well as Ticketmaster, saying this is a vertical monopoly. They define somewhat of a market power, meaning that you have a market share greater than 75%. Right now, it's currently at about Live Nation. Ticketmaster holds 80% when it comes to online ticket sales. And it's not just that. Live Nation a lot of times owns the venues. They're financing a lot of these operations. They're booking the artists. A lot of the artists frequently will go through Live Nation. And now there's also becoming issues where artists are saying, if we don't go with Live Nation and Ticketmaster, we're facing retaliatory actions such as not being allowed at certain venues, not being able to sell our tickets on Ticketmaster, which I think is beginning to create a bigger problem for the federal government.
Right. In fact, back in 2019, the Justice Department geared up essentially as it was looking at the allegations that Live Nation was trying to coerce those concert venues into working with just Ticketmaster. And earlier last month, it was made public that an antitrust investigation was opened up at the DOJ as far as Live Nation is concerned.
Yeah, and this isn't something that's new. I think in 2010, when the Live Nation Ticketmaster merger happened, everybody was concerned about this exact scenario. And I think what you're beginning to see is a lot of those fears are coming to light, because in 2019, they had to agree to extend their original 10-year provision from 2010 to 2020, which basically provided artists that weren't using the Live Nation Ticketmaster greater protections. That was extended in 2019 until about 2025. So I think you're going to see another extension on top of that from here.
We know, and you know better than I, wheels of justice tend to turn kind of slowly, even though they may be moving in the right direction. For the average fan out there, the average concert goer, what can you say to them to make them feel a little bit better about the future here when it comes to buying concert tickets?
So going back to it, I do think this is going to be one of those things where the government's always aware of these types of issues, but I think just given the nature and the volume of the Taylor Swift fiasco, I think you're going to see relatively swift action moving forward when it comes to buying tickets on an online platform like Ticketmaster and other platforms.
Now, I'm old enough to remember going to buy an actual physical ticket at a ticket reseller. Why can't we go back to that? That seems like this would solve a lot of problems. You show up in person, you wait online overnight to get your tickets, and you limit a credit card to, a few tickets at a time.
I think really the reason for that is manpower.
Sure.
It costs a lot of money to staff employees to have them do that versus making it happen online and things of that nature. But it's really going to be interesting to see where they go from here, because I do think you're going to see some alternative measures start being taken when it comes to buying these types of tickets.
Absolutely. All right, Ryan McCall from Tully Rinky, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, the legislative session won't start until January, but some new faces are already coming to the Capitol. When we return, a look at the preparations underway as several newly elected Republican Assembly members get set for the new year. And remember, if you've got a comment, story idea you want us to pursue, let us know. You can email EmpireStateWeekly@gmail.com or seek us out on Twitter. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm Ryan Peterson here in Albany. Now, the legislative session doesn't start until January, right? But some lawmakers spending a couple days in Albany preparing for that gavel to drop. Capitol correspondent Jamie DeLine has more.
Will Barkley has been re-elected for a 2-year term as Assembly Minority Leader. Assembly Republicans meeting newly elected members in Albany for orientation, helping them prepare for the start of the new legislative session in January.
It's a big undertaking. I mean, you come up to state government, it's 212 legislators, the governor, just to know your way around the Capitol. I think it's good to get them up here before session actually begins. So they have to learn, where their office is. They have to learn who staff is, council's office, how bills get drafted, all that kinds of stuff. So that's what the orientation will be about.
Barkley says there are at least 12 new Republican Assembly members, but he's hoping that number gets raised to 15, depending on the final outcomes of 3 races. I caught up with John McGowan, a newly elected member who will be representing Rockland County.
The last 2 days have been phenomenal, meeting with the staff and meeting with my colleagues on the Assembly, the other newly elected members who will be joining me in January. This is my first time in the Capitol building in my life, so it's a lot to take in. It's an impressive building, and you think about the history, you think about all the things that the laws have been passed in our state, the members of the Assembly and the Senate who've gone through here. It truly is an impressive and inspiring place to be, so I'm looking forward to joining the Assembly in January.
Barkley shared with me what Republicans are hoping to accomplish in the new year.
We'd love to see changes to the bail law. We'd love to see changes to raise the age law. We have to get away from this anti-police narrative. So that's going to be our number one priority. We're going to continue to talk about it until reforms are made here in Albany.
I'm told the Democrats will have their new member orientation next week. Reporting in Albany, I'm Jamie DeLine.
Thanks, Jamie. Drivers on the New York State Thruway can soon expect to pay more. Thruway Authority is planning to raise tolls across the system. Says those prices could rise by nearly 15% by 2024. Before any idea is accepted here, there must be at least 3 public hearings. The Board of Directors is scheduled to vote on the increases December 5th.
Clearly, the Thruway Authority is out of touch with reality, out of touch with the times that we're living in. I introduced a bill today that sets forward an immediate 2-year moratorium, a 2-year toll hike freeze to stop this, to reject this proposal and say we're not going to accept this.
All right, stick around. We'll be back with a look at the week ahead in just a moment. But remember, got a comment? Story idea you'd like us to run down? Email us, EmpireStateWeekly@gmail.com, or find us on Twitter. Finally, from us here on Empire State Weekly, with the winter weather fast approaching, the State Department of Transportation is looking to fill a gap in their employment pool. They're looking to hire 500 people statewide, all sorts of positions, as part of their winter preparedness measures. And those openings will include plow drivers, engineers, and mechanics. Next week, we're going to be checking in with the DOT on that hiring progress, as well as the other measures they are taking to keep those roads clear and safe all winter long. But for right now, from all of us here on Empire State Weekly, I'm Ryan Peterson in Albany. We'll see you back here next week. And don't forget, you can watch us all over the state. Here's the full schedule of Empire State Weekly on 10 television stations across New York.